Hey, good evening, everybody, and welcome to our September 15th, 2022 meeting, our first meeting of SEAC for the 2022-23 school year. I'd like to call the meeting to order and start off with our land acknowledgement. The Durham District School Board acknowledges that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships, both historic and modern, with the territories upon which our school board and schools are located. Today, this area is home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We acknowledge that the Durham region forms a part of the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation, the Mississauga peoples, and the treaty territory of the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation. It is on these ancestral and treaty lands that we teach, learn, and live. I'd also like to follow with the Ddsb's Human Rights and Equity Statement. The Durham District School Board is committed to learning environments that are safe, welcoming, respectful, equitable, accessible, inclusive, and free from discrimination while placing human rights and equity at the center. Okay, and we will move on to roll call. I'll start with the regrets. We have regrets from Darlene Forbes. We have regrets from Vera Mercer. Rowan Jarvis, I know he's acknowledged his alternate will be attending. And I believe that's all the regrets that we have. So we'll start with the roll call, beginning Association for Bright Children, which is myself, Eva Kyriakis, and SEAC Chair. Autism Ontario.
Present, Sensa Renab.
Okay. You might know it. Black Parent Support Group.
Jennifer McLaughlin. Sorry.
Oh, it's okay. Durham Down Syndrome.
Present, Tara Kelly.
Okay. Early Years Consortium. Oh, that's our regrets from Vera Mercer. Easter Seals Ontario.
Hannah Nguyen, alternate for Easter Seals this year.
Okay. Learning Disability Association of Durham Region.
Donna Cook, alternate.
Okay, welcome. Carolyn, Member at Large McLennan.
Present.
Okay. Carolyn McLennan. Member at Large Ddsb.
Ddsb present.
Excellent. Ontario Association for Families with Children with Communication Disorders.
Present, Elizabeth Daniel.
Thank you. And Voice for Deaf and Hard of Hearing.
But you already know this.
Okay, I don't see Kathy on as of yet. Okay, so we'll move on then to our trustees.
Trustee Donna Edwards for Ajax.
Okay.
And as you noted, there's regrets, but Trustee Forbes has actually stepped down due to other obligations at this time.
Okay, thank you, Donna. Elementary administrator reps.
David Robson, Principal Dr. O'Shea Phillips, DSA.
Great, thank you. And secondary admin representatives.
Hi, Don White, Principal at GL Roberts.
Great, thank you. Okay, and moving on to the staff.
Sorry, Eva, you have one more elementary rep.
Sorry.
Yeah, there's two on screen tonight. I just didn't want to miss Rima.
Okay.
Yeah, Rima.
Oh, and Tammy. Sorry, and Tammy's here as well. So.
Oh, perfect. Okay, go ahead, Tammy.
I'll go ahead. Rima Sati, Vice Principal at Southwood Park Public School in Ajax.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and moving on then to staff.
Andrea McCauley, Superintendent of Inclusive Student Services, and we have our Senior Manager and Clinical Lead for Speech with us this evening as well.
Okay. Lisa Drake. Okay.
Hi, everyone.
Okay. And I think, do we have Michelle Crawford-Eade and Connor Jenkinson on as well?
Lisa is our rep from our leadership team this evening.
Oh, okay. All right. Perfect. Thank you. Okay. Then we are going to move on to the approval of the agenda. Does anybody have any questions or concerns with respect to the agenda as it stands? If not, can we get a motion to approve the agenda? Tara, seconded. Donna, all in favor? Okay, motion passed. Okay, then we're moving on to the approval of the minutes for June 16, 2022. Does anybody have any questions or concerns with respect to the minutes from our last meeting? No? Okay. Then can we get a motion to approve the minutes? Tara, seconders? Carolyn, all in favor? Okay, excellent. Moving on then to the staff reports, beginning with the administration report.
Thank you so much. So quite excited that where we are at the beginning of the school year, as there's an absolute sense of joy that can be felt in the yards, in the classrooms, and spaces where students gather, such as the cafeterias and the Student Services Hub. Quite incredible to be out in schools. For some, this is a return to learning in person for both staff and students for the first time since spring when we started a couple of years ago, and the adjustment that comes with that from 2020. So links to the Ddsb welcome back video, and shout out to our communications team for putting that together, was in the information, as well as a link to our school start information included in the department report in the SEAC package this month. Just a thank you to our staff for all the preparedness, whether through Ddsb at home or our in-person schools, to really have a great launch to the school year, and to our families and students. Personal anecdote in being able to do school start twice on the first day of the regular calendar due to our bell times, being able to get between two schools. The kids were ecstatic coming off the bus, and just seeing different family members connect in the schoolyard, really quite powerful in terms of a sense of community. So just wanted to thank everybody for that. As a district, our current enrollment is higher than our projections, particularly in both years of kindergarten and grade 1. And a little bit of a spike in terms of first-time enrollers in that information. I'll post it in the chat box in a minute, but our district enrollment currently sits at approximately 54,000 elementary students and approximately 22,800 secondary students, for a total that's approaching 77,000 as a district. So again, just in terms of accessibility, I will post that in the chat box so that members can grab that. Classroom staffing adjustments are being made to reflect those changes. And contextually, our Ddsb at home, our virtual school enrollment, is close to about 1,900 right now, with just over 1,000 elementary students and just over 800 secondary students comprising, but there's still some ebbs and flows in terms of those enrollments and accommodations for kids that our team is working through at a district. Our system leaders and school administrators and senior managers spent a day together in August with a focus on our learning related to implementation of 3 key policies and the related procedures. So Indigenous education, human rights, anti-discrimination and anti-racism, and safe and respectful workplaces. The focus for that day was on our duty bearer responsibility and addressing and naming and looking at how do we interrupt systemic barriers. Across all roles in the district. So we recognize that we have to individually as well as a system. The learning together continued with the professional learning days for school teams and our inclusive student services teams. So we're excited about where we will grow to in service for our students and our families. We thank SEAC for continuing to shape our planning and the learning that will come also through your consultation. So really excited about some of the conversations ahead. Our leadership team was together yesterday and just looking at some of the key goals and learning focus for each team in the department. And we're really excited about the complex work and shifts that are ahead, and really look forward to your input in helping advise us on those. So to continue to grow our supports and services, we do have some new roles introduced to the model this month, including developmental support worker, a senior social worker, and language acquisition worker, which Lisa will speak to, as well as a shift from pilot to permanent positions for the role of child and youth support worker. And so we'll be bringing you further updates on these roles throughout the year. And that launches tonight with Lisa sharing some highlights related to roles specifically led through her teams. In October, we will also share more information with SEAC about the commitments within the Ddsb Mental Health and Wellbeing Action Plan that was shared recently with trustees at standing. The action plan identifies that good mental health and well-being are connected to student success in the classroom, as well as thriving work environments. So a change in the plan is that it now addresses staff and student well-being, whereas the previous version focused exclusively on students. And the action plan centers, as you can see in the image that was within the department report, centers on our commitment to identity-informed and identity-affirming practices, and holding ourselves accountable to that. The accessibility plan, also shared in the SEAC plan package this month, will be further discussed as well. And we look forward to SEAC feedback on the action items within the plan, and just plant that seed. If you can take a really engaged look at that over the next month, happy to bring that back for your feedback, and as well as for the accountability to you as a committee for that work. So that's our administrator report for this month, and happy to take any questions if there are any for clarification or comments.
Does anybody have any questions or comments for Andrea? No? Oh, yes, Donna Edbein, go ahead.
Hi, Andrea. Thank you for that. I was just curious about you said the permanent child and youth worker roles and well-being. When you say that, is it a certain level of complement, or is it like a small number?
It is, and yes to both. So within our, we have a breadth of individuals who support in classrooms, and under the title of educational assistant, a lot of the professionals in those roles have CYW backgrounds. We do have a small complement of what we call EA2s, who are specifically hired for CYW roles, but are supportive within kind of the learning side and executive functioning side within school-based. The difference with the child and youth support workers, there's 7. So yes, small in a district, especially given the enrollment. Just we're formalizing the role. They are a district team within our department who will spend the majority of their time out in schools, but really focused on tier 1, social emotional learning and building mentally healthy classrooms that are proactive in the support of mental health and well-being and relationships and those components, and then bridging with our social work and psych teams to do a little bit of group work. But it comes back to psychological services and social work when we get into kind of tier 2, tier 3, and the more individualized support. So that's kind of where they're fitting within the system. They report and work directly with Stephanie Pellebor, our mental health lead. And so we're really trying to position and look across the tiers and have them really partner with educators on how does that come into classrooms that promote and protect from a tier 1 perspective. But there are 7 of them, and quite a few of them come specifically because CYWs can come with a variety of backgrounds. We particularly looked for CYWs that had mental health experience.
Okay, thank you. And I'm very familiar with EA2s. I used to lead the BIC program, so I used to have my EA2s with me in those classrooms. So.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have any questions for Andrea with respect to the administrator's report? No? Okay, if there's no more questions, then we will move on to the board report with Donna Edwards.
All right. We actually had a special board meeting prior to our standing committee meeting on Tuesday, September the 6th, to deal with 2 trustee vacancies. And then we moved on to our board, which Superintendent McCauley did mention the increase in enrollment. And I think I've got written down here, it equated at that time about 25 classes that had to be put into place. And organization had to happen early on as much as possible because of the increase so even before what we normally expect by the end of September to do, organization, we had, in order to meet those class size requirements, they had to do it earlier. And there's still, seems like we're still attracting many more as we go, as the days go on. And there was a presentation on the mental health, which I'm not going to go through because you've got the presentation on mental health, as well as the accessibility plan that was presented, and I'm sure that we discussed later on in the agenda. And we had a discussion on community use of schools, the startup, in that the process or the procedure has changed for permits. And at that point in time. And I just wanted to make a note as well. I had forwarded this on to Eva, but that every 4 years, the Accessibility for Ontario Disability Act is reviewed. And Rich Donovan is the reviewer for Aoda. They have basically sent out information on the website to support the review. Is actually up and live now. So that information is good. So if everybody's encouraged to go to the website and either submit either written submissions or otherwise. So we will. I'll make sure that's included in the minutes from that perspective. And that's my report.
Thank you, Donna. Does anybody have any questions for Donna with respect to the board's report? Tara, go ahead.
Thanks, Eva. Donna, you mentioned that there's changes to the community abuse permit system. Is that just in response to now we're opening it back up again, or were there actual changes?
There were changes in the process to for application. That was an email was actually sent out to permit users. Part of it, the policy was changed back in May to reflect basically around equity and diversity and ensuring equitable access to, but it wasn't really changed that much. It was the procedure that was changed. And basically they have change permits so that they're issued more or less on a 3-month period time frame, and it's first come, first serve. And again, the focus is on permits for children and youth programs first before other programs within the community. And yeah, so that's basically it. Okay.
All right. So I've heard from Special Olympics that they actually lost their permits at some schools. So
that's correct. That's correct. And so it's been a bit of an issue, yes.
And there's no recourse that they can have on those, because I think a lot of those programs rely on the permits. So they can't afford to go anywhere else to pay for.
We can talk. We can talk about that later, as far as that concerned. Just that, from a Special Olympics perspective.
I know that's near and dear to your heart as well. So.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions for Donna with respect to the board report? Oh, okay. Then we will move on to our Inclusive Student Services Department report. I believe Lisa Drake is doing that one.
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Perfect.
Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be here because the information that I'm so excited to highlight tonight is just, it's been such a win for the students in the board. And this was one of the things that happened last year that I really was just so grateful to be a part of, and I'm really happy to share it with you tonight. So in order to really highlight the piece around the language acquisition support worker that I want to share with you, I sort of have to backstep a little bit and talk about American Sign Language and how that has worked within our board. Upon arriving into this role about 3.5 years ago, the learning curve was steep for me because this was a whole lot of new learning for me. What is an American Sign Language interpreter? How do they work? What are the things that fall within the scope of their practice, and what are the things that don't? And what we figured out right away, Andrea and I together, was that American Sign Language interpreters will literally be the bridge between spoken English or written English and the deaf individual that relies on American Sign Language to interpret. And for students coming into our system for whom ASL is their first language, this model works really well for them. But as I kept on interacting with different schools and different students, it really came clear that there was a piece around ASL that we were missing. And this was generally for students for whom they were born without the ability to access English through hearing, but they also didn't have ASL as a language model from the time that they were born. So we had kids coming into JK who essentially did not have language. And that term is referred to in the industry as language deprivation. And seeing the impacts of that was just absolutely heartbreaking and unacceptable to both Andrea and I. And historically, what would happen and the avenue for kids who were in that situation was that they would be able to go to the provincial school for the deaf in Belleville, but you're putting your very young child on a coach bus at the Walmart parking lot. It's on a Sunday night and sending them off to go live at a school and coming home on a Friday. And that's a big ask for a lot of families. There are some families for whom it's something they've embraced, and things do really go well for the kids who go there most often. However, that's not an option for everyone, and I can appreciate that as a mom myself. So what we ended up doing was sort of really just trying to gather as much information as we could. And in Ontario, the role of language acquisition support worker, which I really wish was just called ASL instructor or something like that, because that would be a little more accurate to what these individuals do. But the Atlantic provinces, their special education authority really has developed quite an impressive model for deaf students, and making sure that they have access to rich language experiences in an immersive way within the school system that go right from walking in the door in those early years and being able to be taught the language within a mainstream classroom context, and then learning how to transition once the language is solid into working with an interpreter, where that would be a more appropriate model at that point in time. So what was amazing was that as we were exploring this, so were other boards in Ontario. So the provincial school for the deaf really did bring the experts from the East Coast to us last year, and we've worked with silent voice partners, as well as and the provincial school, as well as the other boards who were exploring a role like this. And we were really excited to hire our very, very first language acquisition support worker this year. And the person in the role has worked in our board in a temporary capacity for quite a long time. I wish I could have you meet her, because she's just such an amazing human being who is able to walk into a classroom and really help kids. Like, she is very good at seeing what kids need, helping meet them where they're at, and build language in a way that I've never seen before. So we're really happy to have her with us in a permanent capacity within this role that really is going to benefit so many kids who are in this position. So it's called language acquisition support worker within our board. Other boards have chosen to call this role a deaf interpreter. So you might hear it referred to as different things, but that is what we've decided to go with, in part because advocating for our American Sign Language interpreters by calling them interpreters and helping everyone understand what their role is, is something that we work on quite a bit. If we added deaf interpreter into the mix, we thought that just might be a little bit confusing for the system. But so language acquisition support worker doesn't exactly explain it right off the bat. But I'm very excited to start with our first one and help the Ddsb to really understand what her role is and to see where this goes. Because I imagine this is our first person in this role, and it will only grow from here. So that's the first thing I have to share. Anyone have any questions around the LESW role? Donna, go ahead.
It's actually just a comment. I think this is wonderful. I think this is great. I didn't know if people were aware, but across the post-secondary level right now, so the students from deaf and reading that will be transitioning, there is with the ASL interpreters, there is a massive shortage because interpreters don't want to come on campuses. They want to continue to work remotely. So it has been for duty to accommodate a very interesting last 10 days. My team and I put our brains together and we've come up with an interesting roundabout way of being able to support a student. I still don't think it's the ideal model. I think the things that you're trying to do sound wonderful. I just worry about what happens as they're used to this support and transitioning and what seems to be a provincial issue. At first, I thought it was a Durham issue. And so I reached out to colleagues across the province and it is not. Mm-hmm. And so we're really, really struggling. So it's really nice to see that you're making those inroads. And hopefully by the time they get to us, we'll have it figured out. But it's just.
Oh, you muted. Sorry, Donna. I think you hit mute.
I'm having trouble. Sorry. I have a sick family right now, so I'm running back and forth. I just think it's really wonderful what's happening. And I'm hoping we have it figured out by the time they get to the post-secondary panel. So.
Thanks, Donna. Yeah, we appreciate that shortage as well. That's hit us a little bit too on and off. And I think for anyone who has an interest in American Sign Language, it's an incredible field to go into. And I'm always amazed by the skill that our interpreter team brings, because it's not just having a solid grasp of ASL and be able to use it and provide a wonderful language model. It's also the simultaneous processing of the language and then switching into a different language that isn't a spoken language, but a visual manual language that has its own set of rules and syntax. And it's amazing to me what they're able to do. So yes, please, if anyone knows anyone who's even like, hey, that's kind of a neat language, there are jobs. There are absolutely jobs available. Donna, I see your hand.
Yes, I was just going to say, wasn't there, I seem to recollect that the ministry was promoting ASL in the high school as far as courses in the high school. And, do we have it offered, and how many classes do we have it offered? Just out of curiosity.
All right, Lisa.
Yeah.
So thank you. Absolutely. So the ministry did launch a credit program. It was interesting for us too, because we had wonders, right, around honoring deaf culture in terms of ASL, in terms of who instructs, right? Because if you were to enroll through Donna's school, you would be taking ASL from a deaf individual and learning from a member who identifies within the community. So in Durham, we did have one program run in a high school last year. I would have to check this fall's course calendar, but happy to do so and get back.
Okay, thank you. That's much appreciated, because again, we talk about supporting in our schools and looking at the future as far as, ensuring that we have future teachers, and this OASL is another one, and I can see it fitting into some of the special high school majors around the health health services, right? So that would be beneficial. And community living was offering it, starting to offer it. My daughter was starting to take it, and she was really loving it. And then they stopped it. So it's been interesting.
Thank you. So I'll follow up with Superintendent Lazarus. It comes through the language portfolio, but it is an interesting juxtaposition as well, too, in terms of who the student group is in terms of enrolling. It is promoted as a program to enhance employment opportunities by adding that skill in being able to support inclusive programmings and workplaces such as camp counselor roles and things like that. But certainly the juxtaposition this evening too around pathways. And as Lisa shared and Donna shared, to promote people going into fields who are able to support that accommodation, significant in itself. So I'll ask and pull the course calendar, and we'll make sure to include it in the information out to SEAC.
Thanks, Andrea. Tara, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Sorry, it's sort of a cross-pollination kind of questions. I know instruction is really sort of like for the deaf community, and it's fantastic, and sort of echoing all of that. Anytime we can add more accessibility and inclusivity is not a bad thing. We like that. What about, there's a lot of nonverbal children who still are hearing, but they're just nonverbal, and the whole concept, I still remember teaching more milk, please, sorry, thank you, all those, just even some of the basic signs just to help children stop being invisible, because is that sort of something that is in the thought process along there as well, just because part of it is just normalizing it.
Mm-hmm,
right?
absolutely.
Just, having kids in the classroom and they're using signs because there's children that need it, or are nonverbal children that's the only way that they can communicate beyond if they've got their own, communication devices and that sort of thing. But if kids can do that in the classroom too, all of a sudden you start creating an even more inclusive environment as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that in that thought vein as well?
Yeah.
Is that something in their purview?
Yeah, well, within the language acquisition support worker, it wouldn't fall into that bucket, but where signs for communicating the basic needs or the basic ideas that kids are wanting to get across, that would come into probably more the speech language pathologists who are working with those students, because it would all depend on how much language that student was requiring. So as soon as we have, we would be going beyond sort of like those 5 to 10 signs that a student might need to use. That would sort of exceed the ASL knowledge of a speech language pathologist on our team. So if the language needs were growing, then 100% that would be something that we would call upon that expertise that we now have at the board to help us guide what our next steps would be. But I think, when we think about with the single word level to get the more common things that we would experience in the day, probably that would stay within our inclusive student services clinical team for the time. And then if that seemed to be something that student was particularly taking to and it was going to grow, then absolutely we would be able to look at that for sure.
Yeah, it seems like an opportunity for another pathway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's like we said, this is our first one. And so as we keep on evaluating the needs within the system, we're going to adapt and be flexible as we do. Yeah, thanks for that. That's a really great point, Tara. So the other thing I wanted to mention around American Sign Language was just a little bit about our processes for hiring our interpreters. And this is sort of we decided to bring this to you because through conversation Andrea and I were having relatively recently, it's kind of interesting to think about where we've taken our hiring process. That's a little bit unique from some of the other boards. I would say probably several of the other boards in Ontario. In the last 3 years, we have really wanting to make sure that we're hiring people whose ASL skills and interpretation ability are evaluated and vetted by the individuals who are able to do that. So we've partnered with the provincial school. They have an interpreter program. We have like a part of the PDSB is an interpreter branch, and the manager of that program is really eager to work with the boards. And she's been amazing at supporting our assessments. And we hire a deaf individual from the community because within deaf culture, deaf people are the only people who can assess ASL. It would be not appropriate for a hearing individual to do so. And since our interpreters are all hearing and ASL is for most of them their second language, we do have a couple who are children of deaf adults and ASL was indeed their first language. But regardless, we have everyone evaluated to ensure that a member of the deaf community would deem the ASL that they are using to be at a level that is acceptable to be models for children. And so that as they are interpreting, they will be able to continue to grow. Academic words are not necessarily ones kids are learning at home. We want to make sure that they are getting the input that they really need to be successful. And then the two also do a conversation, and the interpreter candidate will interpret back and forth between them. So we really get a sense of both components of that role. And we're a little bit unique that way. And as I'm talking to my colleagues and other boards, we're trying to see what everyone is doing. And I've had some people reach out to me to ask, how do you do that? Who are you working with? And wanting to model that practice as well. So we're really excited that we're working on making sure that the ASL component of our department is as robust as we can make it. Any questions about that? Okay, I have one more thing to share. This is a really exciting month for me. So the last thing that I wanted to let you know about is that within our SLP team, we did add an additional permanent member to the team. And while there is always need for SLPs in schools to have a caseload and support all of the students within the schools, we really were realizing that we had a need for someone to be dedicated to looking at augmentative and alternative communication. So for some students, they may be requiring simple tech, like just these really cool buttons where you push them and they speak a message or multiple messages. We have students who can use low tech paper boards with symbols, and then higher tech devices where the screens will change. And when we did a poll last year of the SLPs, of about 23 SLPs, actively the group was serving about 500 kids out of about 2,000 to 2,500. So it was a significant percentage of everyone's active caseload. So 500 students isn't the number of students in the board, it was who they were working with at that time. So it really did make a difference. It really does make a difference for us to have someone in the role, because there are so many different components of AAC that we need to figure out from a process perspective, as well as ensuring we have somebody who is staying on top of all of the best practices and the technology, and all of the different trainings that are available, so that we can bring that learning back to the team, who can then ultimately serve the students on their caseload to the best of their ability. Other boards do have an AAC role. Not everyone does, but that model does exist. And so we're in the process of really looking at how do we help make this happen within the Ddsb? What do we know from other places? Holland Bloorview has an AAC clinic that we refer students to. So we're working with them to get the collaboration and input around how do we make this role really meet our needs within the Ddsb. So that's in its early stages, but we're very excited about where this is headed as well.
Excellent, thank you. Does anybody have any questions with respect to the last one? Hannah, go ahead.
Let me just get myself on camera and unmute there. Yeah, thank you so much for that, Lisa. I think this is something that I know for many families, part of Easter Seals, this is something that we're often involved with. And so, yeah, this is really exciting to have it. And I really like the fact that you guys are consulting and trying to see what are some of the things that are happening in the province. I wonder, is there any thought to having family consultation around this as you are building this out? I think in particular, one of the things, of course, is that there is so much great stuff that happens on the school board. And then similar to any type of education or training, there's a component that needs to kind of transfer to the home. And I know that the school board does a great job trying to involve families already. I was just wondering what your thoughts are around that in terms of the consultation, in terms of perhaps, what are some of the information pieces that families might want to be passed along, given the particular role and the different intersection of staff that are involved here. What's some helpful details so that we can ensure that, as with any type of language acquisition, right, that it has to span multiple, the multiple settings that they're in as well.
Absolutely. And that's something that that we're really aware of. And being in the school board or in a school setting where we're not in a clinic that parents come to with their child. This is one of the few or only settings I can think of as a speech pathologist where you're seeing a student or a child without their family with them. And so it is something we do tend to do things in schools, and then we do our best to connect with families for how do we carry this over outside of the school setting. And it can be sometimes it goes really well, and sometimes there are some challenges there. You know what, Hannah, I love that idea. And as I'm thinking about the information gathering that we're in right now, would I be able to connect with you outside of the meeting? Because I wonder if there are ways that we could engage parents around what works well, what have they received, what in terms of AAC, and what would be helpful for us going forward. I would love that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it would be great to brainstorm around, where are the places that we can go to gather that information.
Okay, I'll send you an email. Thank you.
Okay, sounds good.
Excellent. That's exactly what we're here for, right? It's fantastic. Absolutely. Yeah, it's fantastic. I love that. Does anybody else have any questions with respect to the presentation? No? Thank you so much, Lisa. That was fantastic.
Thank you so much, Eva.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on then to our open discussion period. We don't have a set topic for this month's open discussion period. Andrea did mention that we're looking at reviewing the 2022 to 2026 accessibility plan and having those discussions, maybe in our October meeting. So it would be really great if we could all go through that plan that was sent out to us before that meeting, so that when we can give some good hearty input into that when we discuss it again. And Donna did mention the Aoda review. I guess my question with that I sort of wanted to ask, sort of SEAC about is, if you guys want to take a look, Donna, do you think you could forward that email to Lisa? And then Lisa can share it around. It has the link to the website for the review.
Yeah.
And yeah, thanks. The question that I would have is, do we want to look at making some, sort of taking a look at it from a SEAC lens and putting, sort of comments in as a SEAC group, or do people want to just take it to their associations to take a look at and comment on through them? And I'm not sure if that's something, we can decide at our next meeting when everybody's had a chance to take a look at the website. But, given what we do here at this table, sometimes having an input, making comments on legislation that really does affect a lot of the children that we're sort of advocating for, certainly doesn't hurt. And then the other thing I was thinking about was, we wrote a letter to the ministry right ahead of the election with regarding the SIP funding that had been decreased. I'm sure that just got stuck on a desk and didn't really get looked at because, people were kicking into the election campaign mode. And I'm just wondering if we want to consider resending that letter, sort of updated and saying, basically now that the election's over, we hope that you would take a look at this again and reassess the funding. That was the one where we were pointing out the amount of funding that we received for the special incidents portion is significantly lower than the true cost. And there was supposed to be an increase prior to the Ford government first coming in through their first mandate, and that was decreased again as soon as the government changed. And we really would like them to bring that back up because that's a shortfall every year to the board for our highest needs students at that. So I'm not sure what everybody, if anybody has any input on that or what they think we should do going forward. Anybody? Tara, go ahead.
I don't think it hurts. Just, yeah, probably they got stuck in the circular file. So,
yeah. And I would remind everybody that we did copy the shadow ministers, of which there'll be shadow ministers now, for which I think we, if we update the letter and resend it, we should consider copying them as well, right? It's hard to make something sort of get attention on something if we don't sort of try to seek sort of other people's attention on it as well, right? It's sort of my perspective. Donna, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that as minister has two parliamentary assistants, which is one is Patrice Barnes. So in particular, so I would say that it would be a good choice to add them to the two parliamentary assistants to the list and resend it.
Yeah. Okay. So anybody want to make a motion that we update and resend our letter to the minister with respect to the special incident portions funding? Tara, any seconders? Donna Edgebean, all in favor? Okay, motion passed. Okay. And I guess kind of rolling it all into one, if there's no questions with regarding to the other couple items around that I've sort of used the open discussion for, because we don't have a sort of a set thing this month, was is business arising from the minutes. We were bringing forward the draft SEAC survey to this meeting. Sorry, Andrea, go ahead.
Just before you move to that, is it okay to make a comment around SIP?
Yeah.
Just because there are members that have joined SEAC since kind of that process rolls forward, may provide just a couple minutes of background in current budget projection.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah. So SIP, or Special Incidents Portion, is a grant application that the district engages in, where on a per student basis for students who require 2 or more board support staff for the majority of their day, we are able to submit a claim, as Eva said, up to a capped amount that is less than half of one staff salary costing, and are able to reclaim that back. For our schools, it can get a little confusing because we have them grant right in the fall. So between November and December, we'll be engaged in those processes. But it is it is providing evidence of the support already in place. So for some of our schools new to that process, and in advocacy for kids, feeling like that's a way of adding FTE to the board, It is not. It is part of the delicate balance that our trustees do in terms of budget, and is based on a model, something that between inclusive student services and budget and finance, we build into the projections. And it is built into the revenue streams that go into the balanced budget that the trustees create. So the incidents portion has, in my recollection, never really pierced $27,000, $28,000 to overgeneralize that amount. And so when you do the math, just sitting in this in terms of the staff time as well, because I think that is a component, Eva, in terms of advocating for the team. Every claim is staff member time away from service to kids. So when we do the claims that are based on health or hearing resource teams or safety, it pulls psychological services with their 5 prongs of service, including mental health, out of service for kids in terms of doing the documentation. But on claims that are under and will overgeneralize to $30,000, we have just over $3 million within our balanced board budget that is presumptive revenue in terms of revenue into the district that is already built into the costing structure of getting that balanced budget as the trustees come to task for. So overgeneralizing that, the $3 million is absolutely accurate. It's $3,081,921 built into the 22-23 budget. And if we overgeneralize to a $30,000 claim, which is higher than the claim amount, you can imagine how many claims that is going in from the Durham District School Board and the paperwork that entails. And then when I put a human rights component to it and the right to protection of information, that is also very sensitive information about kids that we're asking family members to give over for us sharing back with the ministry to an audit committee to review. So I'm always conscientious of that too, just what is contained within those files in order to draw. But the consequence of not doing them is you take that $3 million pressure back into the budget, quite significant. So there's lots of layers to why Eva, as your SEAC chair, will bring SIP up and up throughout the year. Because it is complex, one, mainly in terms of the kids who need that complement of support and woven for their learning and well-being. And then two, the processes that sit alongside that. We have no issue with the accountability for where our staffing goes and how we demonstrate that need in terms of providing that service to kids. That's not the issue. It's that a consequence within that is that at some point, cost-benefit analysis on service to kids, because it does take staff time, significant staff time, to compile those compilation as well. So again, it's 3 million. Oh, I just lost the line. Sorry, 3,081,921 in the 22-23 budget that our trustees, with Donna as chair to that Ed Finance Committee, did the delicate dance of trying to put a balanced budget in place.
Thank you, Andrea. Just before Carolyn goes, Carolyn had sent a message in the chat letting us know she has to leave the meeting early. But I want to take a minute to acknowledge Carolyn has submitted her resignation after this meeting. So she has sat on this board as a member at large for, I'm pretty sure, as long as I've sat on this for the Association for Bright Children. She's brought a fantastic voice to this panel and to this committee, and you're going to be very missed. And we really a heartfelt thank you for all the time and energy you've put in, not just here at SEAC committee, but at the transition committee, at the accessibility committee. Like you've been a really important part of this committee through the years, and I really, really appreciate everything that you've done. I just wanted to say that before you go. Donna Edwards, I see you have your hand up.
That was actually a clap, and actually, as far as that was the end. But I echo what you said, Eva. Heartfully miss your contributions to SEAC, and good good luck on all the other things that you're doing.
Yes. Good luck with everything, Carolyn.
Eva, I
Thank
think
you so much.
an appropriate sign off given Lisa's presentation would be applause for Carolyn.
Yeah, that's right.
That's right. Thank you.
It's been a privilege and my pleasure working with SEAC and all the initiatives, all the adventures, all the meetings we've had, and hopefully being able to contribute to some of the decisions that we've made, the things that we've looked at to help the families and within the Durham District School Board. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay. I just didn't want Carolyn to sign off without us having that ability to say that before she signed off. So does anybody have any questions with respect to what Andrea was explaining regarding the special incident portion funding? Because she's right, it is very complex, lots of layers. And that's one of the big reasons why we keep pushing for them to cover the true cost, as opposed to a bare bones. Hannah, go ahead.
Yeah, so, thank you so much for that information, Andrea, in terms of what the cost is. In general, how does it kind of compare across the GTA, perhaps? I am thinking about the fact that, when you have individuals who require 2 or more board staff, there's a very likelihood that the cost to the families of raising that individual is very high. And so what I think, you'll see is that you see a move out from the more centralized regions where the cost of living can be higher, especially real estate, rental. And so you're going to see a shift into more rural areas or the suburbs. And so I can imagine that may also be an additional factor. I just wondered, what are some of the trends are you aware of them? Is that, available to you? And this is more out of curiosity, really.
For you, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Hannah, I love your heart and your questions too, because you do such an amazing job of reminding us in terms of, in a really authentic way about that 24/7 and centering the child. So thank you for that, because I love your input. In terms of district to district, so we could do a bit of a hunt through published budgets in terms of the delineation of the revenue line. So now I'm curious and I might go look and go get some comparatives just from selection of districts. I think we are fairly prolific as a district. I know some other boards submit fewer claims. We've always taken the approach that it's a revenue stream that's available to us to bolster funding for kids. And again, in Durham, we are significantly over envelope in terms of the different funding sources that come in for special education, comparative to what our expenses are drawing from other areas of funding. And again, for SEAC, maybe if it'd be helpful, we just put a presentation together for administrators on where those funding sources all draw from. And so happy to share that with SEAC if there's interest, and if that would be helpful as well. There's also a funding guidebook on special education funding specifically, so we'll circulate that as well. Trends that we're seeing, certainly schools are seeing, and it's concurrent to the enrollment of kids, as we talked about the early years, 1-2 years, grade 1. So that's kind of happening at the same time. So it's a bit hard to disseminate, but then we see kids structured and older. So there's a couple trends in our board. Donna spoke to the increased enrollment. We are one of the few areas in terms of the province that are seeing high new development. So we have specifically North Pickering, the Seton area. We have West Whitby, which is filling in quite quickly if you've driven the 412 lately, and also North Oshawa. And accommodated housing, and Hannah, yourself and Easter Seals would far more eloquent about this than I am. New building is easier to build in accommodations in terms of accessibility than retrofitting, and that's ease of construction and costing. And so we are seeing quite a bit of an uptake in terms of kids with complexity of needs that include accessibility. The other component to that is we've had a few community partners such as Stewart Homes, who service kids with intellectual and developmental disabilities, move out from Toronto to take into the GTA, but staying proximal to healthcare. So there's a sweet spot along the 401 corridors and the 400 series highways where coming out for real estate values, but not so far out that you're in isolation from comprehensive health treatment and the children's treatment centers. And that's where we give full credit to the growth of Grandview, our local children's treatment center. They are a magnet partner for us in terms of kids and families into the area. And I think of the strength of your organizations. I think of over at the college, and just there's a really good pathway in Durham region forming for kids in terms of all kinds of pathways and options. So we are seeing a sharp uptake. I think the same thing that sits along that is advances in medical science in terms of babies and toddlers and youth and families. And that's certainly changing who we serve as well in our schools. So definitely a bit of a steep intake. I think we are, as I said, prolific a little bit on SIP, but it's because we have a commitment to not turn away funding sources that will actively engage in that. The only thing I will say to that is within the SIP guidelines, there is an ability to submit a partial claim. So you can submit a half claim. And as a district, our team has made the decision to not do so, weighing that against the pulls on service for kids. When we do kind of, I don't want to say cost benefit, but the benefit and risk analysis, the partial claims are a bit nuanced, whereas the full claims mathematically in terms of service work out a bit better. So our budget is based on full claims. Sorry, that was a bit rambly. Sorry, Hannah.
No, that was wonderful.
I'll give you some more information.
Thank you so much for that. Yeah, some really great trends there and some really good things for us to be aware of. Thank you.
Okay. Tara, did you have a question or were you just waving?
I was waving at Carolyn.
Okay.
Sorry, I shouldn't have done that.
Okay. Then moving on now to our business arising from the minutes. We did send out a link to the updated draft SEAC survey, which is definitely more streamlined to sort of the stuff we were talking about, right? About, sort of communication, like involvement, communication, how's it working for you, right? School support team and the communication. What's going well, what you'd like to continue, that sort of thing. Has everybody taken a look at that? Donna, you have too? Okay. What are your thoughts? Do we have any thoughts on sort of where it sits now? Donna, go ahead.
It's interesting because I think Superintendent Macaulay had talked about, about language and not submitting and purposely changing the language in our plan, our specification plan. And then I look at the first couple of paragraphs and we're talking about exceptionalities and special education and special students. And it just I realize we have to get some of this information. And I realize under the Education Act, we are called the Special Education Advisory Committee, but I'm just wondering if we could look at being a little bit more inclusive on the language. I have a few suggestions, but I at this kind of time, we need to start changing things, even though we want to solicit this information. I think that we could solicit it in a better. That's just my first comment from that perspective. And then I have a question, and then I'll let somebody else talk. But it was more of it. It seems like it goes down to basically, I think up to 20. And then it says, like, if you want to provide further feedback on your child's inclusive services programming, and there's like, maybe most of it is collection of data, it seems. And I'm just wondering if we were going to add a couple more questions there, because if they're going to go through it, like, I'm not 100% sure the purpose of those last couple of questions. The two of them are really open-ended, and whether we wanted something that's a little bit more where we can do some collection of data instead of just some narrative. And I know we review the narrative, but I'm just wondering.
I wonder if that should be phrased more like, would you mind providing us with some more feedback on the types of services your student is acquiring? If we want to call it, if it's data we're collecting here, then let's call it what it is, right? Like, would you mind on their, on their placement and support or their placement and identification? And if they're willing to give that, then they can click on this and go forward, right? But they know then they're going to data and not, sort of sharing a story or background of their child, particularly, right? Because I think that's kind of more what this is, right? Oh, there is part that says, what would you like us to know about your child and or your family? And anything else is shared. So I would maybe sort of, maybe we could look at having that reworded to be more, indicate that it's more collection of data. What do you think? Sorry, Tara, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I sort of agree with Donna on those ones as well. Tell us more about what else would you like us to know about your child and your family? That's very specific and very personal to that family and that child. Does having that information make interpretation of the data any better? Like, are we going to look at all of the children saying, oh, my child likes the color blue, and there's going to be 15 people that all include that information, what is it that they were going to get into in those free-form text fields that actually are going to give us any more data in terms of analyzing trends or seeing where our pain points are, that sort of stuff. That one, I think, doesn't need to be there. Number 23, what would you like to know about your child and your family? Anything else you want to share that wasn't covered in the survey? I'm okay. That's open-ended, because that could be another problem, process, service-wise, that sort of thing. Challenges with, working with staff, things that we wouldn't necessarily have covered in there, that if we see trends in some of that sort of data, okay, then maybe we need to kind of peel that onion a little bit more. The only other thing that I had said, I would suggest, not in the same vein, not to do the sort of, I would like my support team to continue to refine, to stop. Again, I think we're going to get very specific, very individualized answers, and we're not going to get trends and that sort of thing. Give me the 3 things that are working well, give me the 3 things that are not working well. That seems to be a little bit more, you're going to get more of a generic answer. So you're going to get some trends and some analysis. Hey, we're actually doing not bad in this area, but no, we seem to constantly be getting the same answer and the not working well. Okay, those are the areas that we want to focus on, because that's really sort of the point of what we're trying to do here, is saying we want to know how we're doing, and then what do we, pick the top 3 challenges, and that's what we focus on to try and figure out how do we improve those areas for next year, and put processes and things in place to help address those needs.
So that's taking out 13.
Yeah. So.
And 9, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of copy paste errors and some spelling mistakes and stuff too. And I can send that over as well.
Yeah.
So it also shortens the survey too, just by taking a couple of questions out. So. Yeah.
And the shorter it is, the more likely people are going to do it, right? The shorter, more to the point. Don, I see your hand up again.
I would just a comment, because the 11 and 12 are talking about in terms of communication, whereas I was looking at 13 basically as far as it's actually about support and assistance. So instead of saying I would like to start and stop, because I'm honestly not 100% sure whether a parent really knows where their support and services are coming, whether it's from board staff or whether it's whatever. What I'd like to, I was more like saying is that, and because you've got you've got, classroom teacher or whatever, I would say, what are the three, to me, it would be, what are the three things, supports and services that you would like to continue? I would like to see that. Then that's specific to that. And then, and the same thing. And then what supports and services, the other thing is what supports and services are not being provided, whatever. Those are the two things that I see in taking that. And they're where you get some data collection, right? Some information. And it's sort of an understanding what a parent may understand of what services are available well, right?
Yeah, Donna, did you notice that 7 and 8 are in terms of communication? What are the three things working well? And then they've just copy pasted the same thing as into 11 and 12. I think those are supposed to be support and engagement. In terms of support and engagement regarding your child, what are the three things that are working well? Like 11, 12, and 13 are sort of a copy of 7, 8, and 9, just with a different topic, but they didn't update the topic in the language, in the actual question. There's like a section there about school support team communication. That's on page 2. And then if you scroll all the way down to whatever page this is, page 4, you get school support team engagement and support. And then it's sort of the same set of questions again, saying satisfied, very satisfied, and then what's working well, what's not working well, and then the I would like my child thing. So it's a repeat of both, just with a different subject. Yeah. So I was saying take out the stop-start thing on both of those sections and just leave the what's good, what's bad in both sections for both topics, but there's a copy-paste error in it. Yeah. It took me a second too until I realized what had happened, and I was realizing I had scrolled.
Right. And yeah, it should say in terms of engagement and support regarding your child and not communication. It still says communication. You're right. Yeah. Hannah, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, thanks so much. So yeah, some great thoughts there. I agree with a lot of those comments and changes. I have a couple of questions, and partly that I am hopping back in here from last year. In terms of the data collection, I agree, like what's the purpose of some of these questions? It sounds like we're looking to collect data. One question as well is like, who's going to analyze this data and how does it normally happen? I do recall perhaps the year before that we had talked a bit about, the former survey, and I was just wondering what was the history there? That's my first question. And I do have a few follow-up, just so you know.
Okay, good. Thank you, Andy. Are you able to answer that? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, for sure. So thank you. We're quite fortunate in the Ddsb to have a really strong assessment and accountability office. So it's a team of trained researchers led by Chris Conley, who is recognized provincially for his strengths and knowledge. So it is actually our A&A team, Assessment and Accountability, that would be facilitating the gathering of the data and then turning a report back over to SEAC and assisting in some of the analysis as well.
Okay, great. And are they able to give us feedback into the design of it? Because ultimately, when you look at analysis, it's helpful to have someone give us feedback on the design and to be able to collect data that is easily analyzable and being able to be analyzed.
For sure. So 100%. So 2 members of that team, and Hannah, so glad to have you back at the table. Chris and Leslie were both with us in the spring. So one of the things that they were challenging us with as a committee, which is spot on your comment, is what do you hope to get at the end of the survey or to be informed of by parents and caregivers, and then to work the questions back. So that's where sort of a shift in language to qualitative, like in terms of what's working well, what are challenges, and reducing the amount of time the survey takes, cognizant of the polls on families. And to make it, this one will be intuitive. So if a parent or caregiver chooses to say, I'd like to tell you more about this, then it'll take into that series of questions. But there's also that ability to say, I don't have a comment on that. And that's where Tara spoke to the groupings of the questions. That'll be a little intuitive to drive it through. But really the big question, and I think the team pushes us rightfully in it, is to say, what do you want at the end to be able to understand better, and able to enact on it, and then to work the questions back. So they certainly help in that regard.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much for giving me that history again, the context. And so with those questions, I do have some comments then now. I think one question, and again, I wasn't part of the earlier conversations, but I'm wondering about, for me, in terms of one of the outcomes and one of the questions that I have is, how does socioeconomic information and from an equity inclusion lens impact on the satisfaction rate? I think that's a long-term question that I have. Are there any other significant factors like language barriers, culture barriers? That's one question I'd like to inquire. And where the benefit of having that tell us about your family, though I don't think that's not, that I agree that that's too open-ended a question, but having some sort of ability to compare, and for information that people would like to disclose. So meaning they don't have to, but I think that's one of the data collection points that I think is important for us to understand.
Eva, is it okay?
Yes, go ahead. Yeah.
So again, really great thinking in terms of that. So one of the layers was whether we wanted, because again, the transparency in research, right, to say, this is who's collecting the data, for what purpose, what's it going to be used for, who will have access to it, and how long will it be kept, right? And certainly when we look at education, we do have a history of there being some weaponization of data that we need to be conscientious of and be very cautious and careful in what we're asking, as well as understanding that trust component of who we need to hear from are those that have been negatively impacted by the systems as well, in order for the systems to change, but it takes the trust to gain those stories. So I think SEAC had made the decision that we would not tie to individual student. And it's interesting, right? Because we do have our student census information, and will be engaging in a next round of the student census. But within that, the use of that information was very tight and protected, rightfully, of those responding. And so we're not able to tie, because we didn't say that we would be using it for other purposes such as SEAC survey. And so I believe, if I'm recalling right, but I'd have to go back in my notes, we wondered if and pondered around, would we ask families by choice to identify kind of their municipality or family of schools or school? And the decision around the table was to gain system trends and where those land specifically in the system for this time on this survey was not what would be sought, but it was district trends rather than being able to disseminate that down to smaller nuances that may hold identifiable. And I think that linked back to some of the questions around the ministry categories of exceptionality and our data points in that too. So the more information we ask that's individualized, the more the suppression rate comes in. So within any of our research, if there's thresholds for where if it's a small number in terms of any response, then that group, that's a suppressed data point because we don't want anybody identifiable. So it becomes really interesting because you're asking really great questions that are really, really important. It's just in the sequence of what, when, and where does that come in. And so I think SEAC, not to overgeneralize the room, but I think is still trying to figure out so at the end of the SEAC, at the end of the survey, what are the key questions in this moment in time that you want information about to inform advocacy and consultation and next steps? So it's a bit of a dissonance because we really need to seek the voice of families, but we need to be protective of that information at the same time. And where does that kind of balance out, if that makes sense? Sorry,
yeah,
too many words.
Yeah, no, that's great. I really appreciate the history and all of the important considerations that need to be put in place in this. And thank you for catching me up too, and some where the discussion has been around that. And then my last thought then would be around whether it would be possible with some of the options to put in like radio buttons, where where the categories are kind of already named. I forget what the term of that for in terms of survey. And that I think for some families, I think it's great to be able to have the option to have the top 3. But if you identify things like, certain phrases and then populating them, pre-populated, and then being able to have the option of selecting multiple and not just, and then it would be rating 1, 2, 3. For example, you can create surveys like that you can only rank them, and then having certain things populated, but then leaving an open-ended option. I think that's one way to create a quicker survey for families. And there you may be some trends already, but then still giving the option to have an open-ended answer. And those are my final comments. Thank you, guys.
Okay, thank you, Hannah. I appreciate that. Does anybody else have any comments or on the survey as it stands, or on anything anybody else has brought up? And I'm not sure. Like I have sort of one. I know what a couple of the questions. Sort of rank how satisfied you are. And you have the choice between the stars or the alternative, which is selecting very satisfied, somewhat satisfied. I think the decision has to be made of which do we prefer, as far as that goes. The clicking of the stars is easy. Does that necessarily give us the same information? Anybody have a preference? Yeah, Tara?
The words, very satisfied, somewhat dissatisfied. There's also a prefer not to answer option.
Yeah.
Can you not answer the star option?
Yeah, I don't know. I was kind of leaning towards the word side myself because you can't misinterpret it. That's for sure. Like, where do you decide on the star rating? What's somewhat dissatisfied, somewhat satisfied, very satisfied. Like, it's kind of, where's that middle, right? So I think there's less open to misinterpretation there if we go with sort of clicking on the word side.
I'm in agreement. This is Hannah here, Eva, as well. I think that the words are a little bit clearer for me. I think the stars are less clear, and it also speaks a little bit, maybe just a very side and kind of like a performance. And I'm not quite sure if that's the language or the optics that we're looking at, or what we perceive it to be. I think people can still be doing their jobs well, but I can be dissatisfied with something else, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, I sort of prefer the words. I think it it gives them opportunity to comment on their answer, right? Either way, but and the prefer not to answer is there, which would be harder with the stars, I think. I just feel like the star thing's a little bit too much like a Google rating or an app rating. Right?
It's a Yelp review.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So, yeah. Does anybody else have any more comments? Or Andrew, would you prefer us to send our comments in, or have you been taking notes? And yeah, you're good.
I think between Lisa and I, we've probably captured it, but happy to take anything. I just don't want to cause individuals extra work, but anything that you want to send in to ensure we've got it, that's great. But we'll take that feedback to the assessment and accountability team and then research later.
Okay, Hannah, go ahead.
I did actually remember one thing from our previous discussion about the survey. And one of the questions we had was, we wanted to know a little bit more about whether families understood what SEAC was and understood who to reach out for. And I remember that being a question. I wonder if that was brought up again in the discussions in the last academic year, and if it's too late to add that, and if the SEAC member associations think this is still an important question to ask.
Yeah, I don't know what other people's thoughts on it. We had discussed that. I know when we were talking about this the last time, we were sort of focused on services and how people were feeling they're being served, like how sort of things were disseminating down. But go ahead, Donna.
Yeah, we went around the discussion actually quite a bit as far as that was concerned, and then it was like, what are we going to do with that? Once we collect that information, do they know it? Well, we already know that a lot of people don't know about SEAC. I think at this point in time, we were looking at just collecting this other information and just maybe adding it again sometime once we move this thing forward. Because then, I mean, we already know that a lot of people don't know what SEAC is.
Well, yeah, I guess that's true, because even if we put it on the survey and they say no, then how do we get that information back to them regardless, right? Like, it really has been, we're trying to do as much as we can to put ourselves out there when there are events and things going on at the board to help kind of get the SEAC name out there, including, SEAC representatives sitting on the Parent Involvement Committee, which is Sensor Renab. Has been doing that for us and has done some great work there. And I think it is a lot of us getting out at community, like at events, and sort of being there. I mean, Andrew, I don't know if we want to put it out there. I mean, even sending an email to our administrators at the schools that if they're having a school function and they're looking for community members or whatever to be there to let us know, and maybe SEAC reps can attend those, sort of program events or whatever. If the administrators want us to do that, which is another way to reach out. But I think as a SEAC, we have to figure out ways to reach out and get that out there as much as possible. So, yeah. Tara?
Yeah, so that same thing. So one thing that we sort of have talked about as well is parent advocacy and parents' level of confidence in being advocates, knowledge of the processes, knowledge of the systems and the service. This survey that we've got right now is sort of focusing on the services and the programming that is being received. We don't really have any questions talking about how confident are you? Do you understand the process? Do you understand your roles and your rights? Do you understand how you can advocate if you are having a challenge? There's some of that maybe we could be talking about. And by the way, we've got a whole committee devoted to helping you with that. There are some of those things, like not necessarily adding it into this survey, but if we wanted to sort of go down that route of upping the profile of SEAC banging our own drum, saying we have a group of really dedicated people right now who are here to help you advocate for your children. If you are having concerns, we're here. Use us. We've got tons of diverse backgrounds and knowledge and strengths that we can use to, even if it's just getting you access to communities and associations that you didn't even know existed. We're here and we're able to help you. I don't know if there's something in that might help. Again, it's only really going to matter if they take the survey and they see and they actually do the surveys and look at that sort of thing. So again, sort of back to that, how do we help elevate the profile of SEAC, because we're trying to help everybody and how do we pay it forward sort of idea. I'm rambling, I realize, but is there something in there that maybe we could think about?
I don't know. Maybe I don't know if it's possible to do something like this, Andrea, with the survey, but maybe at the very end of the survey, provide the link to the SEAC webpage and maybe put a comment there about if you're looking for help with advocacy, please feel free to reach out to any member of the Special Education Advisory Committee. Because I know when I'm talking to people and to parents, like I always, anytime I get a chance to talk up SEAC, I talk it up and tell them, like, you reach out to anybody, like it doesn't matter what their association is, if they'll know who to put you through to, or if they can't help you themselves, because the reality of it is we're all here to help all kids, regardless of what the association that we sit under is, right? And I think that's key. So I just wonder if we could put something like that would, at the end of this, give them the information to SEAC and let them know what we're here for. Because that might be the answer to that, right? As opposed to answering questions. Yeah, Andrea, go ahead.
Just to make sure that I'm capturing that. So at the end of this survey, because absolutely that's a great spot, because I think we're also, we're going to be able to push this out, right, to all of our students that we support. And so that's at least one advertisement for SEAC per recipient. So a link to the brochure page on the website.
Yeah.
And an invitation to connect. And you had a third component to that.
So an invitation to connect.
And then SEAC in a summary sentence. I think.
Yeah, like sort of, yeah, okay. If you need help with respect to advocacy, feel free to reach out to any representative.
Okay, we'll draft that and run it by. Is it okay to run it just by you and Donna as chair and vice chair? And then the rest of SEAC will see it when the draft comes back.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Because I think that kind of covers that without making it questions, right? More questions to ask. So, okay. Just sort of keeping in mind the time now. Moving on then, just the other thing is I'm going to talk about business arising from the minutes. A couple months back, we talked about coming back in person. We've done September's meeting virtual, but as we had talked about before, was coming back in person sort of in the new year. We decided to work out the school year last year virtually and then come back in person for this year. So October's meeting will be held in person at the board again. And we have new members. So I just sort of just a quick synopsis of sort of how SEAC works in person compared to online. Is that, sort of your primary member sits at the SEAC table. Unless they are unable to make it, then their alternate will sit at the table. Alternates are always welcome to come and sit in the gallery and watch. But there's always one person at the table in the actual meeting. And the great thing about being in person is one of the things we can't do virtually that we would do in person is a lot of times when we're doing things like the review of the special education sort of plan, we would normally break off into groups and have discussions in smaller groups about the plan, and sort of formulate some comments and then come back to the bigger table and share those comments around the table. So it sort of allows for much deeper discussion, which is something we cannot do online because we can't break into breakout rooms because we can't stream them. And because we have that public meeting component, with it having to have a gallery, you can't live stream those breakout rooms. So it would just be dead air on YouTube when we did that. So it allows for much fulsome conversation around the table. And then again, there's a lot of discussions, great discussions that happen, sort of before and after, just amongst people sort of gathering and stuff. So it really builds a lot of communication. And I know, for one, I'm very much looking forward to meeting some of our newer members of SEAC in person, because I haven't had that opportunity. We haven't had that opportunity yet. So just so everybody is aware of that, as discussed last and voted on last year, we'll be moving to in person in October. Okay. Any questions with respect to that? Okay. We moving on then to the association and committee reports. We did receive the Ontario Association for Families of Children with Communication Disorders newsletter sent by Elizabeth. Elizabeth, is there anything you wanted to highlight, or is it just sort of for people's information?
Yeah, it was mainly just for information, for distribution. There is one interesting point that they will be having some new members on their executive council that they will be introducing a little later on in this fall. They had really tried to recruit parent volunteers for the role, so that should be exciting for them.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you, Elizabeth. And that's the only report we received, association report we received. We did receive correspondence from the Upper Canada District School Board with respect to PPM 81, but it is my understanding that was revoked or shelved. Am I correct on that?
Shelved. Paused, and yes. We have not heard since.
Okay, so we already wrote our letter on that, but it's just sort of reiterating much of what the other SEACs had raised with respect to that. Hannah, I don't know if you've had a chance to read it, but that's some interesting reading for you, but it was sort of around some of the services and being provided within the schools, including nursing and stuff. So that has been shelved. Then moving on to community concerns. Does anybody have any community concerns they want to bring up at this time? Senator Neb, go ahead.
I'm just going to share what I shared via email earlier today with you. And I spoke to Andrea about it, so I think it's all solved so far. But I thought I'd bring it up to SEAC's attention too. So I was contacted by a parent who's appealing her IPRC placement. I hear this is not a frequent activity. It doesn't always happen, but part of the appeal process is that the parent has to select someone to go on to represent them on the committee. Andrea, please just jump in and correct me if I'm making any mistakes, right? So the parent has called to ask me, the SEAC member, to be that person that will sit on the decision-making committee. I'm looking over where my Andrea screen is, my decision-making committee for this IPRC appeal, right? This is my first time having this happen to me as a SEAC member. I just want to put it out there. Has anybody experienced this? I have a lot of speaking hands.
Donna Jean, go ahead.
So I have to confess, she reached out to me first and I explained things to her, but thought you would be the more appropriate because of the personal situation. So I just wanted to, I was waiting till tonight to tell if it got brought up. I just thought it would be more appropriate that it was you in that. Being involved, I've been as an advocate, but I've also been as the CERT. I've been as like different roles doing it. And I can say that, you're there to support the individual that you're advocating for and listening to what their concerns are. But obviously at the end of the day, it's just trying to find a reasonable solution that makes all parties happy, or what is, and I use the word reasonable because that is how I live in human rights world. So it's about mitigating the circumstances, because this parent is, very passionate, as all parents are very passionate, and helping them understand what is available, what isn't available. And then also with your expertise, bringing that to the table about the community supports, etc., would be also something that might help. So that's not exactly answering your question, but it was a little bit of a confession as well.
Well, she did mention your name, Donna, and I'm actually glad you did send her here, because she had called many other community partners who were all not able to do it. So Exceptional Children,
Carrie's Place, I directed her to.
Like all the regulars are not able to do this for her either. So Mom had a little bit of, I guess, frustration in trying to source the right person, right?
Yes.
If we have any other ideas for families that are doing the appeal, so it doesn't always fall back on SEAC members to be that person, so that parents have some choice in the decisions that they're making for their children, as well as, I guess I'm going to brush up on my IPRC legislation so that I can do the best job possible.
And can I clarify that that's true, that it has to be a member of SEAC?
No, it does. Andrea, you could comment on that for me.
Is that all right, Senator? So the process, when there is an appeal, and thank you for putting this space, we are accountable publicly to publish the number of appeals within the special education plan each year for the previous year. So that's information that we're pretty transparent about by one, intent and requirement. So the Special Education Appeal Board becomes formed when there is a disagreement with either the exceptionality or placement or both. And so then the parent caregiver decision maker for the child puts forward a membership name. The district puts forward a membership name, and then those two individuals pick a third person who is enacted as chair. And those three individuals are then neutral and comprise a committee holistically to hear the information and make recommendation from there. It is not a requirement for it to be a SEAC member. SEAC sits as one option. As you said, Senator Nabbits, I appreciate the stress on families when they engage a process, because inherently within that is time, it's stress, it's emotion, it's their child. So I appreciate that and the concern, and trying to look at how to reduce that stress for families. The only conditions that really sit around it is that the individuals who then form all three members of that committee cannot have any prior involvement with the child or youth. So if a family has had an advocate alongside, which is fantastic, that advocate cannot be part of the committee. The advocate absolutely can attend, because basically it's a conversation of information exchange to the committee, and then parent caregiver and their supports can put the oral narrative into the room. District can do the same, and then the committee takes that information away. So advocates absolutely have a place in supporting parent giver decision maker within that information, but cannot be the member put forward for a committee. Similarly, as a district, it cannot be anybody either from board or community that has had direct involvement in the students' programming and services.
Thank you.
But no, does not have to be a member of SEAC.
I didn't think so, because I just thought maybe the rules changed. Thank you.
I think at this point, the family has done enough trying to source this third party that I think that I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to do it so that at least that one little piece can start to move forward for this family. But I do want to know what other options, where would we be sending families if it's not to SEAC to get the support? I think one of the things that Andrea said that was highlighted for me is that you usually bring your support to your meetings, right? And if your support has come to your prior meetings, they cannot be the person that you're putting forward. So a lot of the times they have that one trusted provider who has been their resource and their support. So where else do we send them? And if all of these community agencies say no, then what are the rest of the guidelines that we can give the families so that there's not a halt or a wait or a pause in the process?
A great question. Thank you, Senator Renab. Do you go ahead, Andrea?
Just as well too. So clarity in terms of adult support and involvement with the child and youth too, because I think that's important too. Because if the parent caregiver decision maker has a support individual for themselves who has been with them through that process, that is distinguishable. I think in the regulation and rules around the language of a person who has had prior involvement in the matter. And to me, that's the students' services and programs. So if this, like, for instance, a service provider, either at the district or in community, has been engaged in service and support to the child or youth, that would be exclusionary. But if it's a support person, say around mental health and well-being for an adult, then we would, that person can absolutely be part. But again, it would be a little, like, I don't know if that would be the best to then put forward, but again, we would define it as involvement with the child or youth drug service, I think.
Perfect. Thank you. Does anybody have any input on that? Has anybody had any experience with that in the past? Donna Edwards, go ahead.
I have never been to an appeal, but it's funny because most, as you said, Andrea, that most of the support people, and as Senator Renab has said as well, the person that they normally have is the person that has been supporting through them the whole process and then no longer can be eligible to be part of that. Honestly, when it comes to a lot of the appeal process that I know of, people have gone into Toronto to a few of the associations, in particular, trying to remember, it's I forget what association it is, but I'll have to look it up. I can't remember the name of it, but those is where it ended up being referred to. There was there wasn't a lot available here. Right, when it comes to an association, especially something that is ability to do it without a fee attached, right?
Yeah. So if I could just follow up, Andrea, one quick question. It came up in conversation with the family. Could the person that they put forward be somebody that they're paying for services? That's because it sounded like a conflict of interest to us.
Yeah, I think that would be exclusionary because they're in payment of service to the child or youth, and therefore directly involved in some of the information that would be brought to the appeal committee or board, informing the decision.
Thank you.
An implicit bias too, right? Potentially.
That sure does limit it for a lot of parents, though, right? Having people that they think they would have the knowledge enough to sit on, as a representative, and yet be, yet to be separate from the child and that as well, right? That really does make it hard for parents. I can really see that dilemma, right? Because my mind's been working, kind of thinking like, who could they go to, right? And outside of a SEAC rep, and I don't know.
What's interesting for us at Autism Ontario, before the big change, we had a person who sat as a community advocate, who could go into classrooms, who could go into transition meetings and planning meetings and IPRCs. But they changed the structure of it, and we no longer have that position available, which I think is duplicated in a lot of agencies like ours. So,
yeah, that's a hard one. Yeah. I think if any of us at any point in time do hear of some resources for that, like, please bring it forward, because that's really good information. Like, it doesn't come up a lot, but certainly when it does, it's really important that somebody's able to find that, so that they don't feel like they're still not getting a fair process, right? So, thank you for bringing that up. Does anybody have anything else to add? Donna, go ahead.
Sorry, and just to clarify, so I think it's important to get back to that parent, to let them know that there was misinformation given that Carrie's Place, because they don't have a prior relationship, could have attended. They thought they couldn't because of SEAC seat. They thought it had to be SEAC, or at least that's what they told the parent because they couldn't get a hold of Autism Ontario at the time. I had also suggested the Carrie's Place because they didn't have prior involvement. So they believed at Carrie's Place they couldn't be a seat member. So I think that's important information that could be given back. Council, the other one I could see, because they would have probably been involved at some point with organization of services, but that's one of the reasons I went with Carrie's Place. So it's interesting. That's why I wanted it clear. So thank you, Andrea, for that. And that should help, and good luck.
Yeah. And thank you for doing that kind of thing, because it's important for sure. Okay. Does anybody else have any community concerns to bring forward? No? And before I forget too, I also would like to let everybody know that we have Elizabeth until our November meeting. And then Elizabeth is resigning her seat for the parents of children with communication disorders. And hopefully they will find a replacement for her. But again, like Elizabeth, you've brought some great voice, and we look forward to having your voice over the next couple months. So we'll try and use your knowledge to the best of our ability until we lose you. But we do appreciate the voice you've brought to this table a lot. Hi, Adam. Okay. Donna Edgebean, go ahead.
I was just cheering.
Oh,
like the clapping thing. Sorry.
It's okay. It's hard to tell. Okay, moving on then to celebrations and successes. Does anybody have any celebrations or successes? I see Andrea's hand up.
Just to put into the space that Grandview Kids did make a pretty significant announcement yesterday. Eva, is that okay to do it now?
Yes, please. Sorry. Thank
okay.
you.
So we will
with everything else.
That's okay. Just Eva and I had connected briefly this afternoon. I have an ask of SEAC. So Grandview Kids yesterday did announce that their CEO, Lorraine Sundstrom-Mann, will be retiring effective in February. Lorraine has over a decade of experience with Grandview. And those of you that have been local during that time can appreciate the incredible expansion of Grandview as a children's treatment center, as well as Campbell School, and under, obviously with the leadership team, but under Lorraine's guidance. Certainly an incredible intersection when we take a regional approach to supporting kids and youth and families. So just one for SEAC's awareness that that's a pretty big significant shift for one of our local partners, as well as honoring Lorraine's commitment and dedication and steadfast advocacy for local services for families. Lorraine has been and continues to be an incredible advocate for inclusive services, cross-ministerial, particularly MCCSS and MOH, and locating those services in Durham. One of the threads that resonates with me is the when families need to travel to access service, all the layers of additional complexity that takes in planning. So when it's in and out for an appointment, if that appointment is downtown Toronto versus located here in Durham, implications for the child receiving service, implications for the adults taking that travel time with them. And then I think certainly one of the other groups that we often reflect on is siblings in the household as well. So I just think she's been an incredible advocate for Durham region, centering kids and families. And so my ask of SEAC would be a letter of congratulations and acknowledgement.
Thank you, Andrea, for reminding me, because that it had slipped my mind. I printed it off, but it was lost in the sea of papers here. I'll
post a link in the chat box to the announcement. Sure. But I think just in service of kids, it would be pretty incredible, I think, if SEAC co-signed a letter of congratulations and acknowledgement.
Yeah. Yeah, there's that. And there's actually one other thing I want to bring up after we talk about this. So if everybody's in agreement that SEAC could write a letter of congratulations, I just need somebody to make a motion for us to do that. Anybody? Elizabeth, seconded by Tara. All in favor? Okay, so anybody want to draft that up, or I'm happy to do it, but if anybody else would like to draft that up? Okay, I'll draft something up and send it around for everybody to look at. We can bring it forward for the next meeting for everybody to approve. The other thing is that it clicked is with Carolyn's stepping down as a member at large. We are going to need to start the process of seeking another member at large to fill that role. Last time we put together a committee, of a few people to sort of look over the applications, and then bring sort of the narrowed down few picks to SEAC for a vote. Does anybody want to volunteer to be on a committee for the member at large, review of the member at large applications? Anybody? Like, I'm happy to sit. Donna Edbean. Okay. Donna, anybody else? It's always good to get some fresh eyes there. Tara? Okay. Okay, so Tara, Donna Edbean. I'm happy to sit. Donna Edwards. Okay.
I was just going to say my comment stands. The reason why I didn't sit on the last one was that, as I said, it's the recommendation of SEAC members at large that comes from the committee to the board, and the board approves it. So, and that's when we vote on it at that point in time. So I don't feel it's appropriate, because it should be the members, the associated commissions that make that recommendation, that I sit on that committee, and I will not, as far as that's concerned, because it goes to the board, right, for approval.
Okay, so far we have, sorry, Andrea, go ahead.
I do have Lisa pulled the last advert for me. So we'll circulate that. I think it's pretty focused on what is SEAC, and then we do have a link to the special education plan. I'd like to take another run at that section just to make sure that it's current policies. I know when we were able to benefit from Donna Edgebean joining the committee. It did reference Indigenous rights, human rights, and centering that. So I do think it's fairly current, but I'd just like to take another run at that and then can circulate it through feed if there's any other comments about updates. But I think we're pretty close because of recency.
Yeah. Okay. That's perfect. Okay. So as far as committee goes, Tara, Donna Edgebean, myself. Does anybody else want to join in on that?
I do not have the capacity. This is Hannah here, but I did want to suggest, perhaps given the regrets, that we just send a specific email to the regrets to see if they're interested.
Yeah, it's a good point, Hannah, for sure. Yeah, we can do that. And yeah, because we'll want to get that out sooner rather than later. I think it would be nice to be able to bring that to board at least right after the election. And if not, I guess it wouldn't be before in all likelihood, timing wise, but at least to be able to bring it to board right after, so that we can get whoever we select sitting, by Christmas time at least, at the table, possibly, maybe. Okay. Excellent. Okay. Any other celebrations and successes anybody wants to bring forward? No? Okay. So our next meeting, SEAC meeting, is on October 20, 2022. It will be at the board offices. That'll be circulated as to what room we're in, closer to the date along with the package. Can we get a motion for adjournment? Tara, seconded by Donna Edgebean. All in favor? Okay, thank you, everybody. Have a great night. Thank you. See you next month.